Well, welcome to New Game Plus. This is a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game, and then we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
My name's Kenny.
My name is Nolan.
And this is episode 78. And today we have a very, very special guest that is joining us to talk about the retro video game Zelda II, The Adventure of Link. But before we get to the actual discussion of the game itself, we'd love to introduce you to our new friend and our special guest, Feasel.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Feasel, we
How's
are
it
so
going?
glad that you're here. Would you mind just taking a moment introducing yourself to our viewers who might not be familiar with who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name's Feasel. I'm a speedrunner primarily. I've been speedrunning since 2007, I think.
Wow.
I've run mostly NES games. That's pretty much my console of choice, but I run some things from other platforms as well. Let's see. I've been to a bunch of GDQ events. I think every one of them so far. And let's see. I've been around on Speed Demos Archive since the early days of speedrunning. I worked on a podcast called The Sunday Sequence Break for about 2.5 years. I produced that. Let's see. And now I mostly focus on, in addition to speedrunning and streaming, I mostly focus on tournaments and competitions and things like that. I run a channel called the Speed Gaming Channel, twitch.tv/speedgaming. And we're live every day for, pretty much the majority of the day with different tournament matches of various retro games. And that's really what keeps me busy. But I still try to find time to speedrun when I can.
Very cool.
We're all so envious of you right now.
Thank you.
I've tried speedrunning, and it's definitely a time commitment. It's a really, really interesting gaming hobby. So how did you originally get interested in speedrunning?
Well, when I was in college, I had a lot of, I had my Nintendo set up at some point, next to where I worked.
Yeah.
And anytime I wanted to take a little study break or something like that, I would just go over and I would put in Contra and I would just try to play through it. And, after doing it over and over again, I realized I'm starting to get, pretty fast at this. I wonder, if anyone else has ever tried timing how fast they can beat a game, which is, kind of a silly thing to ask. But, back in 2006, 2007, that was, not so, speedrunning wasn't really at the forefront of people's minds.
Sure.
So, but I discovered, there's a whole community of people that were doing it on Speed Demos Archive, and I started getting into it there. I did Contra, Double Dragon 2, I did Adventures of Lolo, Deadly Towers. I worked on a whole bunch of games that I'd loved from my childhood, trying to speedrun those, and it just kind of ballooned from there. And then a couple of years later, streaming started being a thing, so naturally I got on that, and, here I am.
So cool. So interesting. Feasel, would you mind if I just kind of take you through a series of rapid fire questions? We've been doing this with the last few of our guests. We found it fun. These questions are largely unrelated. Very few of them have anything to do with gaming, but I think they will help us look into the window of who Feasel is a little bit more clearly. Is that okay?
Sure, I'm ready for anything.
All right.
We have logged the speed times of all of our other guests.
Right. So
Answering
we're
this
hoping.
question.
We totally have not.
No, I'm.
All right, let me get my splits up. Hold on.
That's right.
All right. We'll start really simple, but you can answer whatever comes to your mind. All right. So we'll start with a simple question. Choose one: Apple or Android.
Android, I guess. What I have now.
Marvel or DC.
Oh, Marvel, I think.
Do you believe in ghosts?
No.
Aliens?
They must be out there somewhere, but they're not here. No.
Love?
Sure.
Life after
Getting
love.
deep.
Ooh.
That's like most of life, isn't it?
On a scale from 5 to 10, are you a good swimmer?
I'm like really average.
Do you know CPR?
Technically, I'm supposed to. I don't know. If you die, you're in trouble. I mean, if you're about to die, I'm not going to help you. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I was planning on drowning.
I would love to, but I would be.
It just got really personal, Dustin.
He's not saving me.
Not saving
What's your
your life.
dream job?
Ninja?
Yeah,
Ooh.
absolutely. What's
Great
your
answer.
go-to karaoke song?
Oh, man. Living on a Prayer is pretty good.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite bands?
Favorite bands? I always liked Tool. I think they're pretty good.
Okay, yeah. What's one of your favorite animals?
Animals? I like sloths.
Yeah,
They are funny.
which is the opposite of
I know.
speedrunning.
We're speedrunner.
What's your favorite animated Disney classic?
Oh, Aladdin, I'd say.
Oh, it's
Good
Good
choice.
choice.
Favorite gaming console?
NES.
Yeah. Favorite Final Fantasy?
Oof, man, I'd say 4.
Okay, all right.
Can respect
What are you a super fan of? Is there anything that you are just a super fan of?
Oof, cereal. I eat a lot of cereal. I don't know.
Cereal's good.
That's a great answer.
What's your favorite cereal? Follow-up question.
Honey Nut Cheerios.
Okay. Who was your childhood best friend?
What?
Oh, my buddy Dylan. Hey, Dill.
Are you still friends with him?
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. One of your favorite. It's probably going to slow down just a little bit. What's one of your favorite memories from any GDQ ever?
From any GDQ.
And just one favorite memory.
Favorite. I liked the first AGDQ that they did at the 4-H center. The finale of it was pretty fun when everyone finally got together in one room and they all like slid aside the barriers so that like the whole room was open. That was kind of awesome.
It's awesome. All right, finally, you've got in front of you the Triforce of Power, the Triforce of Wisdom, and the Triforce of Courage, and you can only take one. Which one do you reach for?
Oh, Triforce of Courage. I think that comes in handy.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, there we go. Congratulations. You have
That was
successfully completed the
You're
rapid
not off
fire
the
round.
podcast.
All right.
You passed the test. We're not kicking
Nice.
him off the rest
No,
of the
no,
show.
absolutely. Absolutely not. You nailed it. Thank you so much for being willing to answer some of these random questions so that our viewers could get to know you a little bit better. And that last question had to do with Zelda, which is our
That's
retro game
weird.
of the week. I don't know how that happened, but let's go ahead and move into the podcast proper, talk about Zelda 2.
All right. Zelda 2. So you guys played that this week, right?
We did, and so this was my first experience with Zelda 2. I love Zelda. That's my favorite franchise, and so I should have played this game by now, but I haven't. So this was my first experience, and I'm sure it was the other guy's experience as well. First experience.
It was mine.
Which is an interesting perspective. Nolan, walk us through kind of general overview of
Yeah,
gameplay,
sure.
kind of
Okay.
how it looks.
Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, is an outlier in the series. So it's the sequel to the first title, obviously, and it's actually, if you look at the like Zelda timeline that the fans begged for and like pushed for getting some more information on where each game lies in the timeline, they were like, fine, this is still technically the only sequel to the original game. The others lie somewhere else in like, I don't know, alternate timelines or in the past. So different from the first one, it's actually a side scroller instead of the top-down view. You do have some of that, but they kind of threw in many different elements of gameplay in this one and kind of just put it all together. But you're mostly going side to side like a platformer almost as Link, and you're trying to wake up Zelda. So you've got this Sleeping Beauty aspect of the plot, and you're looking for the Triforce, and to do that you need to find like crystals. It's waking up Zelda is your goal. So like when Ganon was defeated, a spell was cast. Yeah, so it came out in '87 for the Famicom, the disc system, and then a year later it came out on the NES, which is, I'm sure, what all of us played this week. And Feasel said that's his console of choice, and so that was the popular one. And it does have, it's a pretty notorious game for being a strange Zelda title, for being difficult. I mean, I'm not sure why a lot of people hate on it. We'll see, just talking about it today. But, I mean, that's the basics of Zelda 2.
So, Feasel, I've got to know, what's your connection to Zelda 2? Because we kind of placed before you, hey, pick any game that's 15 years old or older, and you settled on Zelda 2. So, like, what's your connection to it? What's your relationship with it? How did you first pick it up and play this game? Go ahead and talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, so Zelda 2, it's a game that I had when I was a kid. When I was a really little kid, I didn't have a lot of Nintendo games. My parents only really bought me a couple. The rest of them I had to sort of rent or borrow. But this one I actually had, so I had as much time as I wanted with it. And I was really fascinated by it, and I didn't have any sort of the bias against it that we have now. It wasn't thought of as the black sheep of Zelda games back then, because it was only the second Zelda game. There was not really anything established as far as what is Zelda supposed to be.
Right.
So when they completely changed the formula to come up with Zelda 2, I mean, I'm sure people kind of were disappointed and wanted more Zelda 1, but at the same time, everyone was pretty fascinated with it, and I was just all about it, and I loved that game as a kid. Much later on, when Speedruns Live became a thing and people started racing, I saw some people racing little short goals of Zelda 2, and that's how I kind of got into it. But I was mostly fascinated with doing it in the dark, doing it candleless, not picking up the candle, which was a thing that the speedrunners do because you don't really need it. Mm-hmm. So getting through Death Mountain without a candle was sort of like a little challenge of mine. So I didn't.
Because this game needs to be harder.
Right. It needs. It's not that hard. Yeah, but I'm really fascinated, and I just wanted to be able to do that. So I just practiced that over and over again, and that was the only part of the game that I cared about was just Death Mountain in the dark. And then eventually I'm like, all right, I guess I should run this, and it turned out to be pretty popular. People like a Zelda game, it turns out.
Yeah. So are you a Zelda fan? Do you like Zelda as a series?
Yes, I'd say I really do. I've picked up, I can speedrun, I think 5 of the Zelda games, so I really do like Zelda, probably more than other series. I mean, I like Mario, and I like Metroid, and I like Mega Man and Final Fantasy, but, Zelda's probably the most, most important series to me.
I'm curious, what are the other Zeldas that you speedrun?
I've speedrun Zelda 1, I've speedrun Zelda 2, Link's Awakening, LADX, and A Link to the Past, obviously. Those are the 4. I guess I'm counting. Yeah, those 4.
Cool.
Right.
Awesome.
So you'll find out Nolan Zelda is his franchise. That's the
like
game.
Many people though, it's not like a.
I mean, not
everybody loves Zelda.
Not everybody. I mean, not anyone else here. It's not Kenny's and it's not mine.
Okay. All right.
I mean, if we only looked at our interactions with Zelda in the past week, I would probably look like a bigger fan than Nolan would.
Are you saying you played Zelda 2 a ton?
No, I'm just dropping in that I got to play some Breath of the Wild this week. But that's
we're not even going to talk about that because I don't have it and I won't
so I won't rub it in too hard, Nolan. I know he's looking forward to getting to see that game.
I do think we need to talk just a little bit because, Nolan, you brought it up here in the overview about the whole discussion of timelines. And the reason why I think we need to talk about it, at least in part, is because some of our viewers emailed us this week even asking about what our take is on the Zelda timeline. And so I think we should just a little up front talk about that. Feasel, and then, Nolan, I want to hear from you too because I don't know. Okay. Are these games all connected in some way? And if so, how? Obviously, 2, I think, is supposedly the only direct sequel, meaning that it directly follows the first one. But then after that, are these games connected? Obviously, they're in the same universe. What's going on with that?
Okay, I have a couple thoughts on this. First of all, you're right about it being direct sequel, and the whole thing about, hey, if you go down to the bottom of Death Mountain, there's that little spot where there's a little forest and a lake, and it's that's supposed to be a microcosm there of the Zelda 1 map. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but
I don't.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, right at the bottom of Death Mountain, they have that little thing, and I think it's meant to be sort of a nod to Zelda 1, but it definitely tries to connect the 2 games to each other. But in general, I feel like every Zelda game is a unique story. It's like a reimagining of the Zelda and Link and Ganon and Triforce story, and I don't feel like there's supposed to be any connection to it, and I think that, fans like to see some connection, and they like to know how it all fits, and that sort of pressures Nintendo, and it pressures different, fan critics into trying to put together timelines, but I honestly think they're all just completely unique stories, even though they're supposed to have some connection to each other, just reimaginings of the same thing.
Yeah, and I agree. Whenever the Hyrule Historia book came out, and they said they put a timeline on it, I was like, I'm fine with them each being their own story. I don't even need an explanation of it's a retelling of the original. I was just okay with them making each game different. But at the same time, going forward, if they want to place a timeline on it and then try and make the games fit in that's okay too. I just think it was forced. They didn't go into the franchise thinking, let's make Spirit Tracks 15 games later, so it can line up with the past of, they didn't. Right. It's just mapped together now, so it's a mess. But I think that it's okay to have each game be its own thing.
Sure. I mean, no one's begging for a Mario timeline, so...
You wait. It'll happen. Someone is going to get furious.
Sure. I just don't think that we have to force it. So whether or not Zelda 2 fits into your fictitious timeline or Nintendo's whatever they've created for the sake of fans, Zelda 2 is, for all intents and purposes for this discussion, a standalone game, the game that we played this week. And so now let's actually talk about those experiences in our gameplay section. Kenny, do you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, so definitely I think the things that we want to talk about first or primarily are some of the unique aspects of this game. We've mentioned that it's not like any other Zelda game, but Nolan's not kidding when he's saying it's basically a platformer. It has not only a lot of platforming elements, but it has some unique RPG elements that you don't have in some of the other Zelda games as well, which was kind of interesting. And so beyond kind of the overworld map, not the top-down view not being the main gameplay element, it's something that more like it's hard to equate it to like a Final Fantasy 1 or a Dragon Warrior or something like that, but kind of like that. You're just navigating the overworld map to go from encounter to encounter and from dungeon to dungeon. But once you're in content, everything is completely side-scrolling.
Yeah,
and that was interesting for me. I knew this game was different. And I know people had said, it's got like platforming in it, but I didn't know that was like primarily how this game worked. So that came as a little bit of a surprise. But for me, not a completely unwelcome one. It definitely felt different from some of the other titles, but I felt like they still did a good job of establishing this world. I thought walking around in the cities in that side-scrolling 2D or side-scrolling environment actually felt sort of more immersive than if you would get a top-down sort of view that was more typical of RPGs at this time. And so that was kind of fun, and it translated into different kinds of challenges, where a lot of Zeldas are classically puzzles and, figuring out how to progress, and less, though a little bit, about kind of your actual mechanical skill. There's a lot more of that in this game, which I think lends itself probably to being an interesting game for speedrunning, because you have to know it well, and you have to be able to actually hit those marks and perform things well. And so I'm glad that we brought a speedrunner on to take their take on this game as well.
For sure. It's such a weird like mixture of game types, like of genres. Like I don't know what you've compared it to a few games there, even with Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior, but
none of them even really work.
Well, okay, so because you've got 2 meters, you've got your magic meter and you've got your health meter, and then you do collect spells throughout the game. In fact, you have to have certain spells to be able to get past certain areas, and then you level up. You get experience points and you level up. So like but then you're moving left to right and I mean, it's platforming, and it's all about beating the enemies that are in front of you, clearing a cave, beating the boss there, and then rinse and repeat over and over again. And I felt it really weird, but I don't know. But I was feeling that those kind of mixtures of genres were working here.
Yeah, they definitely added a lot of RPG elements to it. I'm much more so than in later Zeldas. You're right. The XP system is something completely unique to Zelda 2, and the whole like upgrading your stats. Having different stats that you can upgrade independently. It just made it very different. It definitely feels more like an RPG than other Zelda games do.
And there's random encounters, kind of.
Yeah,
it's not always battles, but there are random encounters when you're going over the world map. So there, at times, it really did feel like Final Fantasy to me, oddly enough.
Yeah, well, and you probably shouldn't even, obviously speedrunning the game is different than a casual playthrough, but in a casual playthrough, you probably shouldn't just try to avoid all of those random encounters or like run through them avoiding the enemies, because you probably need to grind some, I would imagine.
Yeah, did you guys have to grind? That was one of my questions for you. Did you have to grind it all to advance, or did you just keep making progress?
I did.
I did some natural grinding in that anytime I got in a random encounter, I fought my way out of it. I didn't just try to jump through. But and I'm just going to be honest with you, Feasel. I hope you don't look at me differently, but I had like to get deep into this game this week. I used a liberal use of save states.
That's fine. It's a very tough game.
Yeah.
I mean, other Zelda games have a lot of difficult things about them and like puzzles to solve and stuff like that. This just simply surviving in this game really is a challenge.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And that's what it is. Like that's what threw me off, because the other Zeldas, the ones that I'm more familiar with, I mean, Link to the Past, really puzzle oriented, right? So like you're having to get this key to be able to open this door, to move this skull, to find this button. I mean, so it's very puzzle oriented. This was not at all. Like I never really got lost. Like I knew for the most part where I was going. And if I didn't, I mean, it was a small turnaround and I was able to get back to where I needed to go. Right. And the caves were pretty intuitive of what I was trying to accomplish. It was just simply getting past the stupid enemies that I had the most difficulty with. Yeah. Especially the red axe throwing guy.
Gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Made me want to quit this game so many times.
What I do like about the combat, though, in this game, so they made it a side-scrolling platform at times, and they didn't simply just say go in front of enemy and slash. You kind of have to crouch at times to dodge stuff and jump slash. Like there's more depth to the combat than you would think going into it. Like you have to actually be mindful of what enemies do, what each one does, and how to like plan out how you're going to get past them, because you can't just jump over them.
Right. No, I agree entirely. And this is really what attracts me to the game, both, as a speed run and just as a game in general, is the combat is really complex. Mm-hmm. And, Zelda 2 has a lot of faults. And, I think they kind of dropped the ball a little bit on the game design and level design. But the one thing that I think keeps you coming back to it is the combat system is really good. Like the controls are real tight compared to a lot of games at that time. Controls are excellent and it's real fluid and they're complex. So you have to do all this jumping and crouching and slashing, or, crouch, down stab into a regular slash. You can jump forward, slash a guy behind you and in front of you because it has just the right amount of momentum to your character that you can, be going one way and attacking the other way. Mm-hmm. Like everything about it, they really fine-tuned it. So it really feels nice to play. And the sound and the little explosion animation when you kill an enemy is so satisfying. You kill something, it's like, and you see the little experience points pop up. That's so fun. I don't know what it is about that, but that sound is excellent. And, just the whole thing just feels nice to play to me.
I think the combat was crucial. Like if they dropped the ball on that as well, then the game would have been very flat and just frustrating, kind of for no reason. But the fact that go ahead.
I found, at least, Nolan, that it was a little repetitious. Mm-hmm. You get different creatures and different dungeons and whatever else, but it felt a little bit sort of doing the same thing again and again. And so if that mechanical interaction isn't interesting, if it's literally just like running up, hitting an enemy or something very basic, I feel like interest wouldn't have held for me nearly as much as it did in this, where I feel I had to be on my toes and I had to be thinking about what I was doing and trying again sometimes.
Yeah.
It's the variety in enemies and the complexity of how to beat the enemies that really does make this game so interesting. That being said, was there a particular enemy that gave you the greatest difficulty, that every time you saw it, you probably ended up making the decision, I'm just going to try to jump over or run past or do something to try to avoid this enemy? I already said for me, but mine was the red axe throwing guys. Just completely frustrating. So the boomerang guys were frustrating, but I was able to finally figure out how to handle those guys. And then the axe guys come and just drive me insane.
For me, will forever and always be Keese. Those are the bats in Zelda. Their movement's predictable, but for some reason, like what they're gonna do, they're still gonna hit you. It's very frustrating.
And what happens in this game is that they're often near lava pits, which are instant deaths if they knock you into
even
it.
Better, yeah.
This wasn't the most difficult enemy, but the ones that frustrated me, just because for some reason I would get antsy and be really bad at them and continuously run into them when I shouldn't, is the little floating skulls.
Oh yeah, that you kind of have to stall with slashes. Yeah,
and you're not. I guess you can kill them, but it's really, really hard. Most of the time, it's like hit them and stun them and run past. And I just instead it was just like run into them because I think I'm going to get past them and I'm not. Yeah. And frustrating.
Yeah, and they drain your magic too.
Yeah, which is like insult to injury.
Are there any that drive you crazy, Feasel, and from a speedrunning perspective?
Oh yeah.
From speedrun perspective, the boomerang guys, the Gorias are probably the hardest thing to get past. Because the axe guys, I know what you're talking about, but once you practice it a bit, they're actually one of the more consistent enemies to deal with.
Well, I felt like I practiced. Is there a way?
1 week of playing this game does not count as practice when you're taking it from a like speed running kind of perspective.
No, but like I would play and try to. I would just say I would save state right in front of a guy. I would try to fight him and beat him about 10 times. I'd close out the game, go on with life, come back an hour later, and do it all over again, and just. It's just so frustrating. Can you verbalize what the trick is with those? Because I think it is a matter of, with all of these enemies, it's doing it enough to where you figure out how they work. But the other frustrating thing is that they move backwards. When you move towards them, they move backwards.
Yeah.
Like, so frustrating.
Game of chess.
Right. Yeah, you can't jump over them because, well, you can. The trick is you got to let go of the D-pad. What it does is it looks at whether you're pressing forward on the D-pad, and if you are, it'll back up. But if you jump, get enough momentum to start moving forward and let go of the D-pad, the enemy will stop moving and you can go right over it.
So smart. Okay.
That's kind of great. Like, to think that the programming is that thoughtful.
Yeah.
On something as simple as a 2-button D-pad interface is kind of wonderful.
That's got to be one of the, that seems to me like one of the more core mechanics it takes to speedrun this game. Like, you just have to be good at that.
Yeah, manipulating the enemies, sure. Knowing what they're going to do. But the axe guys in general, the hardest thing, it's really hard to fight them in the dark, but the thing is, it works whether it's in the light or the dark. You just run up to them, and you do a jump, and then you crouch, and then slash them, and just hit him with just the tip of your sword, grazing the very front of that enemy, and it just works out. The timing works out that once he spawns from the start, from the side of the screen, he'll start throwing an axe at just the right time that your first jump, you go right over it. And from there, you can just sort of watch, he'll throw his hand back and then throw the axe every time he's going to do it. So you just watch for it and jump over it and hit him every time as you're coming down from jumping over the axe. That's the strategy for fighting him.
Yeah. The thing about speedrunners always is a rule is they make things so look and sound so easy.
Just do this.
Or I just get fat fingers like with most video games and then dialogue.
It's just just give me the controller. Yeah, we also have to keep remembering Feasel does this in the dark at the Death Mountain part. So just let that soak in.
Is there a video that we would be able to watch you run this in the dark? Is there a VOD on YouTube or anything?
Yeah.
I don't. I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure my
I'm pretty sure I've seen it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's dirty. That's ridiculous. Okay, so speaking of all that, anytime we have a speedrunner on the show, it's interesting to find out what it takes to speedrun this particular game. So what kind of gameplay mechanics do you rely heavily on to beat this game quickly? Do you use any exploits? Like what mechanics in Zelda 2 do you utilize to be able to beat this game very quickly, besides not using the candle?
And what's considered a good time on this one? It's a fairly long game, but not impossibly long. And so, relative for our viewers, relative to all the time they spent trying to pound their head into it, how easy do you guys make it look?
Okay, well, that really depends on what rule set you want to play with, because there are glitches that you can exploit to go really fast. And you're probably going to be surprised a little bit, but the fastest completion of this game is 18 minutes and 7 seconds.
Sure it is.
And so, it is sub 20 minutes. A bunch of people have sub 20 times. That takes advantage of some wrong warp glitches. You're able to lock the screen. I can talk more. This is really nerdy stuff. We don't have to go into it.
Hey, we like it.
Yeah.
All right, cool. But there's some glitches where you can warp to different parts of the map that you're not supposed to be able to go to, and you essentially, the glitched version of the game takes advantage of that over and over again just to get a few required items. I think it gets like down stab and the power glove, and that's it or something. Or maybe it needs one of the spells. I can't even remember anymore. But yeah, you get very little. But most of the time when people play this, they play this without what they call major glitches, like no major glitches run.
Yeah.
And that'll take 45 minutes-ish to an hour, depending on what rule set you're playing under.
Yeah, so about the time it took me to get out of Hyrule Castle. Yeah, so are there any we talked just a little bit about the spells that you have. Do you rely heavily on any of those to be able to get quickly through the game?
Not really. The only spells you really need, well, the fairy spell. Yes, you do rely on the fairy spell because you can ferry through doors. If you don't have any keys and you are ferrying, you go right through a door.
Oh, okay.
And so the speed run really is about trying to time, when you get your magic level ups and when you get your magic refills from the jars, such that you can ferry through as many of the doors as possible and not go out of your way to pick up all the keys in the palace.
Interesting.
Right.
And so, that's...
That makes sense.
Yeah, because the going out of your way to get the keys when you don't have to, that's going to waste you time. So yeah, you get a lot of use out of the fairy spell, a little use out of the jump spell, and that's pretty much it. I mean, you need the thunder spell to fight Thunderbird at the end, but other than that, you really don't make much use of other stuff. You can get the life spell if you want. If you really want to be, risky, you skip the life spell. The biggest exploit that makes this game doable as a speedrun is being able to game the experience system. So I don't know if you guys figured out when you... did you guys figure out how the experience system works? Because it's really not obvious.
No, but to me it seemed like it was like score based almost, because when you kill enemies you get XP.
Right.
But
and then you hit a certain level and then you level up. But then I was confused because it looked like you could pick which of those three that you upgraded, but I couldn't even I would just get stuck on one and only be able to do one. Maybe I was just doing it completely wrong. But obviously you can do your attack, your magic, and then your life, your health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing that a lot of people find. They just go into the experience menu and they just pick the first thing because they don't know how the selecting works. So the way it works, easiest way to explain it is that when you get experience, it's sort of like currency that you can use to purchase level ups.
Okay.
So anytime you fight an enemy, you get some experience. It goes up. There's like a numerator and a denominator in the top right corner. That all goes to the numerator part. Once that numerator gets above when the next level up is supposed to happen, and there's different level up thresholds for attack, magic, and life. Once you've passed one of those three, it'll ask you, do you want to take this level up? At that point, you can cancel. You don't have to take it. Like if there's the next level was 1,000, for health, 1,500 for magic, 2,000 for attack, and you hit the 1,000 point, it'll only offer you the life level up.
You can wait and save up and hit those more expensive.
Right. So yeah, you'd have to say cancels, which is a really hard thing for when people are like, hey, would you like to level up? And you're like, no, thanks, bro. That's not a thing that you're used to doing.
Yeah.
But you need to do that. And then 500 more experience later, it'll ask you again. All right, now do you want a magic level up? Or at that point, you can go back and select, no, just kidding, I want the life level up. And it'll only spend the amount that it takes to purchase that level up. Okay. So that's the way I think of it. It's sort of like currency that you're buying levels with.
Yeah, I kind of like that.
That is
really complex, actually.
What's the strategy then, speedrunning it, in terms of how to maximize that efficiency?
All right. So the thing is, the attack levels are always a lot more expensive than the life and the magic levels, right? And the thing is, when you go into a palace and you put the crystal in the palace at the end, after you beat the boss, you put the crystal, it takes whatever amount of experience you have now, and it just boosts that up until it hits the next level up. So whatever the next most expensive level that you haven't bought yet is, it will give you that much of a boost. So for, as long as you keep leveling up the attack pretty early on, the cost for an attack upgrade goes up so much that it's like, 200 for life, 400 for magic, or like 5,000 for the next attack level.
Yeah.
So all you do is you fight the boss and you get your experience to the point where it's past the life level, past the magic level, and then it'll just give you a boost of like thousands of experience to get you to the next attack level. And so if you do that right, you can get through the whole game without grinding and being like close to 888 at the end of it, just by gaming the experience system on the palaces.
That's awesome.
Super interesting. All right, well, that's our gameplay section. Let's move into talking about how this game has aged now, many years later, from '87 to 2017. How has Zelda II aged?
This is the controversial section, I think, probably.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, it is controversial, but this game came out in '87, and for that, I think the graphics.
Yeah,
the graphics are amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, this came out not even a year after the first Zelda. Is that correct? I believe so. Within a very tight time frame there, and with that, and then Feasel, you mentioned earlier, the enemy complexity and design. There are. There are dozens, right, of different enemies with different schemes and even battle systems. I just think there are many different mechanics, and the look and the feel and the sound. All of those things translate well to today. I think it's brilliant.
Well, and one of the big ones for me always when it's going back and looking at it, how well a game is aged, is the ability to pick it up and play it, and it makes sense, and it be responsive, and it, just mechanically it still functioned well. And this game excels on that front, I think. Enough complexity that you do have things to learn, but nothing that's like daunting, and responsive, and how you navigate the world and all of those things make sense. And so there's not any barriers that we run into sometimes with certain really old games or really unique games or really terrible games, that it just is clunky or doesn't work. It's an easy game to pick up and play.
All right. Personally, I think that it probably hasn't aged as well as it could have, but honestly, compared to other games of that era, when you go back and play this game versus going back and playing some other side scroller from that same period, this is far and above. This is way better than those. Even back in the day when this first came out, it really was mind blowing to people.
Yeah, and I could see people who were fans of Zelda 1 being blown away at, like, they probably didn't even think about the gameplay being different. They're like, oh, this is a side scroller now, we want the top down. Like, I'm sure some people might have, but I really don't understand the hate. After playing, I only played it a week, but first impressions, and then at the end of the week, I was still like, I think this game's still really playable, and Dustin, I agree. I love the graphics. I think it looks really good, especially for 87.
Yeah, I think with them changing up the game type, what they were going for is greater immersion, because the other one was top down, and they're like, all right, let's actually bring you into the world where you can see it, from a side-scape perspective, and I don't know, I think they did well with that.
Yeah,
sure,
and then,
yeah, really unique.
Go ahead, Feasel.
Go ahead.
Y'all both said go ahead, so
guess
then it's my turn to talk. I mentioned earlier how much I loved the town.
So Kenny goes
immersive around, and I think that it really was great. Anytime you're playing a pre-90s kind of early NES title, there's gonna just be some of that really retro vibe.
I mean, sure,
and that's not what everyone is into, but again, it wasn't a hurdle in this case, and because of the reputation that the game has as sort of the outlier game, and it not being a game I'd played, I expected it to be an actually worse game than it was. I think, Nolan, in the same camp you were. I didn't come in with real high expectations, and I was pleasantly surprised by some of those unique things that they did, and still felt like I got unique things about Zelda, and it still felt like a Zelda game, if different, and some of the same story and characters I love, and the things that are enjoyable for me about a game, it had.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the tough, but the thing that makes people not really take a shine to it is that it's just so much different than what the Zelda series has established. They've gone in a certain direction that is very much in line with Zelda 1 in a way, but Zelda 2 is just different in so many ways. A lot of things that you expect to see in the Zelda game is not there. There's no rupees. You don't buy anything. There's no bombs. There's no bow and arrow. There's no boomerang. You don't upgrade your sword. There's no master sword in it. I mean, even your health bar they're not hearts. In other Zelda games, you have hearts as a health bar. It's a box.
Right. Yeah. And you have lives. Like, you normally just have your health bar. It's a completely different game mechanically, though, still some of the same story and some things that feel very Zelda. You get Dark Link and some really, cool things, but very different, yes.
Right, yeah. And they experimented a little bit with side-scrolling in some of the handheld games, but this game, of course, its primary mode is side-scrolling. Even the random encounters, it's so weird. I actually really like the random encounters in this, because it's not like Final Fantasy random encounter where it's just like I walked and, there's another enemy. Right. It's like they pop up, and it's like you have a chance, and it's hard, but if you're good and if you're fast, you can actually dodge those things. There's a lot of real clever speed tech to, trying to manipulate those things. I think it is a really nice mix of random encounters and fixed encounters. I don't know if I've ever seen another game do that, but it really is unique right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I would say when it comes to age that is just the difficulty level. And I mean, back then, obviously, we've established many times on this podcast that games largely were just a lot more difficult. Today, they kind of spoon feed you, and even easy games are difficult for a lot of people. But I think that translating over to today, I mean, someone's picking this up for the first time, they're going to start off thinking, this isn't hard, and then they're going to get to Death Mountain, or they're going to get a little bit in, and then realize that this game is a lot more difficult than maybe what they're used to. And so, if you're picking that up today, that's going to be one of the things that you're going to have found that aged in a different way. I don't know if I'd say even poorly, but aged in a different way than what you might be more used to.
Yeah, the difficulty is, I think, always going to be just so loud and in your face with most of the retro games we play. Like you said, because we're used to easier games now, like the new Marios. If you die a bunch, they give you this like free invulnerability thing that you can get through the entire level. Anyways. Yeah, I thought it was very hard, and I did use save states, but I can also see myself like dying, like getting some progression, and then getting game over, and still wanting to keep going. And it wasn't to a frustration level where I was just like, it's unplayable. And that was kind of my understanding of the game just by what people have said about it and just the reputation it has. I'm not seeing it. I think that's a forced opinion, honestly. It's not a bad game.
Yeah, like some games get popular for being popular. I think this is one of those games that kind of, because it was unique, it's the easy opinion to hate on it a little bit and
it's unfair
to deride it. And people can not like it. Like, it literally is different enough that I'm okay with that choice. But because of some of that being the conversation that I'd heard prior to coming in, I definitely was surprised how much I didn't feel that way as well.
Yeah.
Which brings us to our final summary section, where we either, as individuals, give or withhold our votes for New Game Plus status. So let's do that now. Kenny, do you want to explain what that is, and then we'll get into it?
Yeah, New Game Plus simply is us saying, hey, this is worth, in 2017, your time to go back and look at as a game. Could be for a lot of reasons. Value as a game, fun, entertainment, whatever. If we think it's worth your time as our viewers of the show, we will give it our New Game Plus status. And if we say, hey, don't waste the time, avoid it, then we will not do that.
The way that I like to think of it is just a general thumbs up or thumbs down. So let's let our guest go first. So Feasel, would you, after playing, I don't know how many hours you've invested into this game, would you give Zelda 2 your vote for New Game Plus status?
Sure, I'll give it a thumbs up.
Okay.
Easy.
Awesome.
I like how you kind of bias the question, Dustin.
Yeah.
Like, hey, remember
like
how much time you invested in this game?
Like was it a waste or
a whole bunch of this game? Now give us your opinion on it.
Right.
Who's gonna be like, nah, it's not a good game at that point?
No, I've run some games. I put a lot of hours into some games that are absolutely awful and just terrible. Like Swords and Serpents, Deadly Towers. But and yet this game actually is deserving of it.
Yeah. Just recently, we had on another speedrunner. You're probably familiar with Brosincha.
Yep, I watched that one. He's great. What a great guy.
Yeah, he's incredible. But we played Athena, and he knew that this is not a game that most people should play.
Yeah.
All right. So that's one yes. Nolan, you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go. So I love Zelda, and I don't know. I think we all went into this buying that whole opinion that is like, Zelda 2 is the worst. They made it a side-scroller. It's very hard. It's not fun. And I think it's totally unfair. It's not the best Zelda at all. Probably ranks lower on my list even. But, like, the game is really fun. And I think the game looks amazing for the time. The graphics are really fun, very different. And the fact that they put in all those different areas of gameplay, like the RPG elements, the battle system, the fact that there is a battle system that you can even say the combat system, and then still have like an open world, go back to that iconic Zelda 1 feel, and they pulled it off. And like I don't get it, or I don't get the hate, so I give it New Game Plus easy, and I'm curious to see what you guys think about it.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
Dustin, why don't you go next?
Okay. I understand why Zelda 2 gets such a bad rap, especially in comparison to the quality that the Zelda series is and how different it is. But I was expecting this, along with you guys, to be a lot worse than what it was. I had heard this is the black sheep and that people just dislike it. And I had fun playing this game. I thought it had its charm. The music and the graphics and the gameplay hold up remarkably well. But that being said, it's not a game that I think that the general populace would necessarily enjoy. And so for me, I don't think it's a must-play by any means. And although I had some fun, the frustrations and the difficulty and the red axe throwing guy made me want to quit this game so many times. So I'm actually not going to give it my vote for New Game Plus status. So that means that
let's see if you're smart or stupid.
We've got 2 yes. We've got 1 no. So, Kenny, what do you think?
You did make my job easier, Dustin. I was a little torn on this one. I'm with you guys. Like, for when it came out, it was a pretty title. Yeah, it plays really differently than the other Zeldas. But if you didn't take that into consideration, if you just wiped the name off of this and sat down with this on an NES and played through the game. The gameplay of the game, would it be enjoyable? And it's not one that would be enjoyable for everyone. You're right, it is a little more difficult than you might expect. I still will say that I found parts of it a little repetitious, but overall, I had fun. And when you have fun playing a game, that's a big indicator to me that they're doing what they're supposed to do. So. Yeah. I'm with you, Dustin. I get why it gets knocked. There's definitely some decisions that I think they could have done differently. Feasel mentioned even dungeon layout earlier and sort of map design, and I think he's right. There's some places it's a little weak on some of those fronts. But overall, it's a fun world, handled in a fun way, has a classic game kind of feel, and one that I enjoyed, and I think people ought to be familiar with despite its kind of bad rap. So I'm going to give it New Game Plus.
There we go. That's the majority, meaning that Zelda 2 does get our vote for New Game Plus status. Congratulations.
That's a surprise. Like I said, I didn't know how we'd handle this, especially since you guys were going to give me a hard time and be like, I expected you to be like, oh, you love Zelda, why do you love this game? But I'm glad how we ended up where we settled on it.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not opposed to it. This is one of the games that kind of took me most by surprise, just because of what all I had heard about it. But sure. That's advice and wisdom for all of you viewers. Don't just listen to what other people say. Play the game for yourself and see what you think.
Don't judge a video game by its cover. That's the phrase, right? That everyone says?
Nope, it's not.
We had a few emails from our loyal viewers this week. Jan emailed us at ngppodcast@gmail.com and said, hey guys, was curious to see what Zelda 2 was about. When I started it, nostalgia kicked in. I suddenly remembered playing this when I was a kid. I think I rented it for a week, but never got far. It starts with some great music, really gets you going. The gameplay is nice, saw a bit of the RPG elements when I upgraded my health points and weapon, which is nice. The enemies are interesting. They all have different ways to beat. It's not just hacking away. One thing I thought was quite annoying was the beep when you're low on health. I understand it's a risk to be low on health, but do you really need to remind me all the time? I do understand why some people think it's a bad game. If you go in expecting it to be an RPG, I think you will be disappointed. If you think of it as a platformer, I think you can have some fun with it. I really like platformers, so I had a lot of fun.
Fair enough.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. You can't go into it thinking it's going to be your stereotypical Zelda game. It is a platformer.
Yeah.
All right, we received another email from Paul. Paul said, hello, Dustin, Kenny, Nolan, Feasel.
Hello, Paul.
Zelda 2 is a game that holds a special place in my heart, despite what I feel is a rather unearned reputation as one of the worst Zelda games outside of the CDI abominations. It is the first Zelda game I ever played, having received it for my 8th birthday. I then went on to not to complete it for nearly 24 years, not for lack of trying. While difficult, this game never felt exceptionally cheap. and most areas of the game are relatively quick and easy to get to from the beginning palace. The fact that most items are merely gateways for the next palace rather than ways to explore the world or defeat enemies is a bit disappointing, but the magic spells do take over this role rather well. Soundtrack is an underrated gem, and the palace theme remains one of my favorite video game tracks ever. Overall, I would recommend this game to anyone who likes Zelda, but is wary of the standard Zelda formula. And for those that don't have Switch or Wii U, for Breath of the Wild.
Oh, gosh. Do you guys know what version he's talking about, the CDI version?
Yeah,
Not
I know.
version, it's a game.
They're pretty interesting.
Yeah, they are.
Like, what do you mean by interesting? Like terrible?
It's really hard to explain.
Yes,
Other than
interesting means terrible.
Just look it up on YouTube. It's
it's
interesting.
gonna be rough.
Yeah.
Was it Nintendo? I mean, I guess it had to be, right?
It was not a Nintendo project. They sort of licensed their name out, and it was they're not really Zelda games. They don't fit. I don't think anyone tries to place them in the timeline, and people just don't count them because I think they're just sort of like other kinds of games that they decided to skin with Zelda. They're pretty weird. They're not. I mean, they're awful. Yeah.
Are these games so bad that this might be part of the reason that Nintendo doesn't do any more licensing kind of things?
Yeah, like,
years later, their philosophy may have been affected by how bad. Those
I don't even
were.
consider it part of the main franchise. I think a lot of people don't. It's just kind of a weird. It's even more of an outlier than Zelda 2.
Another email from Zion. He said, there could be a lot said about this game. Zelda is one of my favorite series. Of course, this one was not my favorite, but it is one I spent many hours playing. I was able to enjoy it, though it seemed harder than I remembered. There was a lot of grinding, so I could upgrade my heart, strength, and magic. Finding the little secrets made this game that much easier and fun. I found this game short, but hard at times. I very much want to go back and play more this weekend.
Go for it.
Yeah. So the secrets we didn't even mention, but you can walk on kind of the overworld. You can walk in places that do not have any difference notated on the map, and you can end up with an extra fairy or little dolls. Feasel, what are the dolls?
One up.
Those are your life ups, I believe.
Okay.
I'm not Feasel, but I answered your question anyways. I may have misremembered.
Yeah, no, they're one ups. One ups. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And then we've got one final email from Bill. And he said, I am error.
That's a great email. Yeah, so
what is that about?
It's a text box.
No, it's one of the people that you meet, and like in one of the first towns inside of his house, you just talk to him, and all he says is "I am error." Does that mean anything?
Yeah, it's a joke. It's a couple of things there. Okay, so you know Bagu. Depending on how far you got, you probably have to have met Bagu, right? Bagu and error are the way it works is Bagu it's like one of those Japanese mistranslations. It's supposed to be bug. It's bug, but they add bug, they make it bagu because you have to add the vowel at the end if it ends in a stop consonant. So error and bug were these two guys.
That's great.
And it's sort of a joke, but they translated to bagu because they didn't quite get the Japanese in joke when they localized it.
Nintendo,
that's so
you're
funny.
cute. That's awesome. Well, thank you guys for your input. As always, you can always shoot us some emails, some thoughts, commentary. We'd love to include it as a part of each and every episode. ngppodcast@gmail.com. It's that time to randomly select our next game of the week. But before we do, we often like to ask our guests if they've got any other game suggestions that we should add to our Retro Master list. It doesn't matter if it's already on there or not. Feasel, is there a game that is 15 years or older, that you think that we should at some point in the history or in the future of our podcast that we should play this game?
Good or bad?
There's a bunch of good candidates. I'm going to go with the Battle of Olympus.
Battle of Olympus.
Don't think that's
not on our list.
Nope, it's a good
addition. Should be. It's excellent. People compare it a lot to Zelda 2 because it's another side-scrolling hack-and-slash game, but it's based on a mythology theme. It's like 10 times better looking, though. Gorgeous art, great music. When you pick up items that actually help your gameplay and then aren't just like sequence items to get to the next thing. It's sort of like a way better Zelda 2, but the combat's not quite as good. But it's
super interesting.
Very interesting.
Battle of Olympus is excellent.
We're gonna add that one on.
Is it NES?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You know it. That's Feasel's system. Awesome. Well, now we are going to randomly select our next game, and we're spinning the randomizer now.
The fate of my week every time.
I didn't even know this game was on the list. All right.
Is it Hydlide? Tell me it's Hydlide.
What is that?
Unfortunately, the game that we are playing is not on the Nintendo Entertainment System. It is actually on the Amiga, also came out for the Atari and the PC in 1991. It's a puzzle platformer, and it's called Lemmings.
Lemmings.
Oh, that's excellent. Lemmings, that's a great game.
Classic game. Like
I know of
classic.
the characters, but I've never played the game before.
Same.
Oh, this will be a fun week for you then to do some puzzle exploring.
All right. Well, we'll play Lemmings this week. Hopefully, you'll be able to find a copy, play along with us. Feasel, you should play too. Let us know what you think of it.
Oh, I love Lemmings. It's great. You can get it on the PC, Super Nintendo's, a whole bunch of different versions.
Yeah,
easy,
one of those things. They've thrown it on everything. So
perfect. Super easy way to play then.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, that's our game of the week. We'll be playing for the next 7 days before we join together for our next episode. But we won't be here with Feasel. Feasel, thank you so much for being with us. How can our viewers keep up with all that you're doing? How can they connect with you on social media? Find out what games you're speedrunning right now?
Sure. Probably my Twitch channel is twitch.tv/Feasel, Feasel. I'm on Twitter as Feasel0, like the number 0 after my name. And then you can watch the Speed Gaming channel, twitch.tv/speedgaming. We do, I'm over there anytime that I'm not like streaming or something like that. I'm doing stuff over there. So yeah, those are probably the places to go.
Any game that you're working on right now, speedrunning?
I mean, I've got a bunch of things that I practice a little bit, but I don't have any new projects right now. Mostly recently just worked on Final Fantasy 1. Probably put the most time into that recently.
Love it. What a good game.
I love that game so much. I would never want to speedrun it, but I love it.
It's awesome. Well, hey, man, thank you seriously so much for joining us this week, taking time out of your busy schedule to play through Zelda 2 with us, to talk about it with us here on this podcast. If you are a viewer listening to this podcast, watching us on YouTube, make sure that you swing by and join us on our Discord. We regularly have conversations there, and it's not just through email. We talk almost daily through our Discord channel with our viewers and are connecting, talking about the game, talking about a variety of different things. You can find that link on our social media, which is just /NGP Podcast or @NGP Podcast. As always, you can listen to us directly on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Music, any other podcast provider. We do stream live as we record these podcasts on twitch.tv/NGP Podcast every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. And then later in the week, we'll always make those VODs available for you. You can visit us at patreon.com/NGP Podcast for some behind the scenes content and some additional and bonus content that we usually have each and every single week.
We would like to pause for a second and do a special thanks to Bradley and Zion. They are our producers on our show, and they help us weekly to provide you guys with some quality content and some bonus content. So thank you guys so much for all that you do.
Absolutely. Join us next week as we play Lemmings. Until then, I'm still Dustin.
I'm surprisingly a big fan of Zelda 2.
And I'm Nolan.
And that's Feasel. And this has been another episode of New Game Plus.
Peace.